What's up, everybody? Welcome to what do we call it? The post-Michigan Euphoria edition of the Bottom Line on Sports. I'm Jean-Jacques Taylor. He's Jeremy Pink. And yes, I'm still basking in the glow of victory over the hated team up north. And I told a friend of mine this today, man. If you win the game, you spend a bunch of time on social media because the pettiness of the winners, if your team won, is hilarious. The memes, the tweets, all this
Right,
stuff is funny.
right.
If you lost, you probably got off of it for a few days because I don't want to be reminded of it. I don't want to see any of that stuff.
What's interesting? What I looked at was what were the Michigan fans saying after the
Oh,
game,
yeah.
just to see what they were complaining about, you know. And so they were complaining about the refs and the Jeremiah Smith call and blah 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 blah. But this is not a function of Ohio State or Michigan. Don't complain about the refs, whether you win or you lose. You know, you can't complain about the refs. You could complain about the refs in every game.
Yeah.
Stop. It's not a function of this Ohio State Michigan game. Just stop. Never complain about the refs. But that seemed to be the number one thing that was on they were complaining about, which is understandable because nothing else really went right for them.
No, it was, and we'll take a deeper dive toward the end. But
Hmm.
for the most part, and I said this happened last year, and it was the case this year. As I've told a couple people this as we were chatting about the game. I was like, the way I look at it, they can't win without help. Like you've got to turn it over, you've got to muff a punt,
Right.
you've got to make a bonehead decision,
Hmm.
you've got to have a bad. They can't win if it's just straight up football. So if you can avoid those disastrous plays that breathe life into them and help them win, like what happened last year, they can't win. They're not. That particular team is not good enough this year to win. So,
Yeah,
uh,
there's a tremendous gulf in talent this year. There's no question about it. And Ohio State, look, I think Ohio State played about as poorly as it could have for the first, 6 to 8 minutes. And the game was never, I was never concerned about Ohio State, even when they fell behind in the first quarter. I just was watching the game. I'd never had a concern about them.
no, no. Now, the big story of the week:
Hmm.
Lane Kiffin has bounced. He's left Mississippi. He's headed for LSU. It's been one gigantic scandal. I don't know if scandal's the right word,
I don't think it's a
but
scandal.
I mean, it's
There's a cloud that tends to follow Lane
I would
Kiffin
say it's been a
wherever
big
he goes.
mess
A
because he's
mess. There you
messy.
go. Yeah.
He's messy. It's a big mess. I found it funny and amusing because Lane Kiffin, I don't want to say I like him, but I find him amusing. Like I don't take him seriously, and I don't believe anything he says. But he's a hell of a football coach, and so I can understand why Ole Miss was sad that he left, and I can understand why LSU is hyped that he's there. But let me just tell y'all this, and you know this to be true, Jeremy. You know this to be true.
What's that?
Now we're not talking about us personally, not me, not him. But if you acquire a significant other and they were married to somebody else at the time, when you acquire them and they start kicking it with you down the road, LSU, you can't be surprised, you can't be mad, you can't be shocked when this happens to you. Because it's going to happen to you.
It did. It did. And the problem is though, or the issue is, did he actually upgrade to LSU? And
Oh,
Brian Kelly, listen, Brian Kelly tried to do the same thing. He didn't upgrade. Now that is that a function of Brian Kelly? Is it a function of
I think
LSU?
man, we've
Yeah.
talked about this before, but I think it's a really good discussion. College football is so regional that you got to understand where you're coaching and how that fan base gets down.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter if we're talking Duke basketball, They want to win and play a certain way
Mm-hmm.
and comport themselves a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
If it's Carolina, they want to do it a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
If it's Syracuse, they want to do it a certain
Of
way.
course.
Kentucky, and the same thing with football. And so Brian Kelly, in part based on that fake accent he had when he showed up, he
Right.
never understood LSU.
Yeah.
Now, Lane has been around the SEC, whether it's at Alabama as the OC, at Tennessee for a year, now at Ole Miss for 4, 5, 6 years. He understands the SEC.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He understands what LSU is all about. And so I think he'll have tremendous success. The question, because it's Lane, is how long it takes for him to crash and burn.
Well,
Because he will at some point.
well, LSU is to colleges what Lane Kiffin is to coaches, meaning that Lane Kiffin has a shelf life of X number of years before
Yeah.
he flames out. LSU has a tolerance of Y number of years before they get rid of their coach. So this could be an incredibly volatile marriage.
Oh no, it's going to be incredibly volatile because the thing now, I'm sure he understands this, but does he really understand it? Which is what the record you got at Ole Miss, they'd have built you a statue and you'd have kept your job forever. That same record at LSU is like, why you ain't get to the SEC championship game?
Yeah, but you're getting
why we ain't won no championship
right,
yet?
right.
What's wrong with you? Why we only winning by 30 points? Why we only scoring 28 points a game? That was never an issue at Ole Miss. That's an issue at LSU now. And that's where it can become, you got the governor. I mean, it's the whole state of Louisiana. And I think volatile is easily the best word to describe it.
Yeah, well, the other thing, if you look at LSU right now, is LSU is not. If you look at sort of the top jobs in college football, um, that now has to be who's going to give you the biggest, most amount of money to go out and buy players right now.
Right.
LSU right now is not one of those schools. LSU is not, and it's one of the top schools. But it's not going to buy you the best players right now. You can see, the bigger schools, the Notre Dames, the Ohio States, or if you have a huge benefactor, the Texas Techs, the Texases. That's where the money is. It's not at LSU. And what Mississippi figured out was they're going to have to spend some money. And that's one of the main reasons that Lane Kiffin, I think, was successful is at Mississippi is because they gave him what he wanted there. He could lord over the program. He could get the money, and he could buy some really good players.
Well, they never told him no.
That's right.
And now here's the money thing. He was making about $7 million a year at Ole Miss. I believe LSU signed him to a deal that's like 7 years, about $13 million a year. But it was never about the money at Ole Miss because they had told him, we'll basically match whatever you're getting.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't really about the money. LSU told him they'd give him a budget for players of about $25 million a year, give or take a couple mil. Ole Miss, I think, said they would try to do something similar. But I think the question for Lane, and it's an interesting question at one level, is did he believe he could win a championship at Ole Miss? Because it's all about winning titles at a certain point. Can you get – and it's interesting because in the pay-for-play era, it evens the playing field because now Ohio State, Alabama, pick a Georgia, you can't stack it like you used to stack it.
You don't have the depth. You don't have
the depth because Ole Miss said, well, Jeremy, we'll pay you $3 million to come play for us.
Right.
And Ohio State is like, hey, doc, I mean, we can't pay you that much.
Well, and I'll tell you something else. If you look at the college football playoff, I think one of the most important things to look at in the college football playoff is to see which teams actually have the most depth, because you're going to have to go through 3 or 4 top-ranked teams in order to win the national title. And only a few schools have that kind of depth and that can get through that. And I don't think Ole Miss is one of those schools right now. Maybe they are down the road if there's enough NIL money. I'm not sure LSU is. I think there's only maybe 6 to 8 schools that have that depth that can that can actually really get through a gauntlet of three or four games of high quality teams over a short period of time.
Now, I don't really have a huge problem with Lane Kiffin. Now, that being said, I think Lane Kiffin was delusional, meaning he really, I think he really convinced himself that he was going to be able to leave Ole Miss, go to their rival, one of their rivals, LSU, and coach
Oh,
Ole Miss
pure insanity.
through the bowl championship series. I mean, dude, nobody does that. College football is big business. There's no big business where you're the CEO of one company and you go to a rival company. We do the same product, the same thing. We're in the same big boy category, even if you're in the medium category. But we produce the same product, and you're going to a competitor. They're not going to let you hang around for 2 or 3, 4 weeks.
No chance. Not only that, it's very likely that if you're in a major corporation, you actually have to sign a non-compete agreement. So you
Yeah,
can't work somewhere for 6 months to 2 years or 3 years, depending on the industry. Yeah, so I think you're right. I think delusional is the right word. But I also think it goes back to your prior point, which is that I think if Lane Kiffin thought he could win the national title with Ole Miss this year, I think he would have stayed. I think he's looking around and going, he's not going to win the national title this year
and
because I don't think Ole Miss can win 3 or 4 games against ranked opponents over a
well,
short period of time.
I think you're right. I think he probably looked at it and said, at some level, this is the best kind of team I can put together, and it's still not good enough to compete against the Alabamas and the Georgias and the Ohio States. And so, if I go to a place with LSU that's got a bigger brand, it's got more money, and I think it's a psychological thing too. Meaning, if you commit to play high school football at LSU, you anticipate playing in the NFL and you anticipate
Mm-hmm.
playing for championships.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you go to Ohio State, you anticipate
Mm-hmm.
playing for championships and having a shot at the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think if you go to Ole Miss, you anticipate playing. I mean, you might anticipate playing in the NFL, but I don't think you anticipate playing for championships. Like, this is what we do at Ole Miss. We play for titles
Not,
every year.
yeah, because it's not. And I think there's also something more. You use the word psychological, or I'm not sure how to actually describe it, but one of the things I think Lane Kiffin realizes is he can walk away and say, this is the best Ole Miss has ever done.
Yeah,
And he's probably pretty confident that whoever replaces him isn't going to do nearly as good of a job as him. So,
right.
so while he won't have gotten a national title at Ole Miss, he can turn around to anybody and say, look what I did for that program. Look how far I took it. I took it as far as I could there, and no one's going to take it further. Look at how wonderful I am. Now I'm going to LSU, and now I'm going to try to win a national title. And I think he's going to quickly find out that I'm not sure LSU is one of those schools right now that can win the national title on kind of an annual basis where because I think that's changed now. I think it's become the schools that have the ability to attract money on a year in and year out basis are the schools that are going to compete for national titles every year. And
And
I
look,
think that no, but and I so I think you're going to see like Texas, Ohio State, Texas Tech, some of the bigger state schools. I don't think the money is at LSU like it is at some of these other schools or the Notre Dames. I just don't
I
think it's there.
that's going to be very interesting because I think it'll be interesting whether the money ultimately will trump the state pride. And I say that because at LSU in Louisiana, you grow up wanting to play for LSU because it's the only school there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like Texas where you might grow up wanting to play for A&M, you might want to play for Texas,
Mm-hmm.
you might want to play for Baylor, Texas Tech, depending on where your parents are from.
Nobody wants to play for Baylor.
But in LSU in Louisiana, that's what you. And
Sure.
so if A&M is offering you 1.2 million, and LSU is offering you $1 million, and Mama can come and see you play easily every Saturday, that might be enough to keep you there. So that I
Let me
think that's worth tracking.
let me ask you this question. If your son was offered 1.2 million to play at LSU or 1.1 million to play at Texas, wouldn't you tell him every single time take the 1.2 million at LSU, even though you're, more aligned with Texas?
Not necessarily.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
No, and I'm not even being funny. I'm being serious because the money is that close. So, I'm also a pragmatist. So it's about all these other factors. I just told a kid this the other day, who's got a chance to interview for a job. And he's like, "Oh, I think they're going to pay me this much money here, and that's the da 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 da." I go, "You're so young," because he's 25. I go, "The most important thing is not money, man. Most important thing is what are they going to let you do that enhances your skill set? Because the money's going to come because you're young and you're good."
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
think
that's what I mean. So,
that's,
uh,
but I'm
as,
sorry, that's good advice to somebody who's 24, 25 and is debating between a 55,000 and 60,000 a year job. That 200K difference that you get at age 18, if you take that 200K, and we were talking about this earlier,
spoken like a
offline
financial
earlier.
guy.
Yeah, if you take that 200K, park it, let's say after taxes you get 120K. You take that 200K, 120K after taxes, you park it in an index fund for the next 40 years. That's worth a hell of a lot more than the having your mom show to the game or having the state pride. I mean, for me, I'm very much of a realist. Is that you take what's in hand and in a
Right.
situation like that. But I can completely understand the other point. That's just not something that I would, if my kids were in that position, that I would advise them. You take that 200K.
So you would take the highest bidder every time.
Not every time. I think that you would have, if it was a substantial difference, I would. If it was, I think anything over six figures, I would. I tell the kid because I would just look at it very pragmatically to say, you know, if the stock, if an index, the stock market index over time goes up, let's say roughly 10%, that means that it doubles every 7 years. So your investment doubles every 7 years, right? So that means it goes up. That 120 goes to about 240 after 7 years. So by the time you're 25, you're at 240. By the time you're 32, you're at half a million. By the
Right.
time you're 39, you're at a million. By the time you're 46, you're at 2 million. I think it's a $2 million decision. I don't think it's a $120,000 decision. That's kind of how I look at it.
All
So
right. I can get that.
yeah. So
Bottom line for me, Lane Kiffin, can you win a championship before this thing blows up? I don't know, but I can't wait to watch.
bottom line for me, I think Lane Kiffin will be not quite as successful at LSU as he was at Ole Miss, and I think he's going to severely disappoint the LSU fans by year three of him being at LSU if he stays through 3 years.
You think there's a chance he could leave before 3 years?
Well, it's Lane Kiffin. Who knows? Who knows if he's going to make that decision on his own? He might wear his welcome out after 3 years, but no, I think he'll stay beyond 3 years, mostly because I think the state of Louisiana and the university itself, the last thing they want is another buyout, based on Brian Kelly and what's happened in the last couple of years. But I don't think I think he's going to have equivalent success at best at LSU that he had at Mississippi.
All right, so check this out. I was perusing social media the other day, and I found an interesting story. A guy named Adam Sparks wrote it, and it's about going inside the NIL deal with Tennessee at the University of Tennessee.
Mhm.
In terms of, every school's got 20.5 million and how they break it down, and in general, college teams now are like NFL teams in terms of you got a salary cap and you got to
Mhm.
figure out how you're going
Mhm.
to manage it and how you're going to allot certain money to certain players,
Mhm.
certain position groups,
Mhm.
or how you do it. Now, the in I thought it was a very detailed article and it's very insightful. The one nitpick I'll have at it though is the perfect way to get into this story is to talk about their quarterback last year, Nico Iamaleava,
Exactly
and
what I have written down. Exactly what I
and
have written down.
how he tried to play them and get more money, and they just decided you're good, but you're not that good. We're not going to mess up our salary cap
Hmm.
for you.
Hmm.
And how they adjust. I mean, that to me, I don't like. I don't even know how you can write that story and not get into that because that brings it all home.
Yeah, I think it's, and I think that is sort of the poster child for the NIL era is Nico. Nico thought he was more, as you say, Nico Iamaleava. I can't pronounce it.
Iamaleava.
Whatever you just said, I'll call him Nico. He and I think is largely his dad, from what I recall.
Yes.
But he and his dad kind of overvalued him, and he ended up at UCLA. And I think he's an exceptional player. But it also shows you that the universities have only a certain amount of tolerance for paying players before they can move on, and that's because there's a couple of reasons why. One is there's an there's an endless supply of talent. Talent
Yeah.
does not you're not it's not like the NFL where there's a finite supply of professional players. There's an endless supply of talent that's coming up 17, 18 years old. There's also an endless supply of hope in college football. So if you don't have a great team this year, you have hope that you can get a great team in a couple of years if you attract a couple of players. So I think that is an element of what's happening here. The other thing that I found instructive from reading that article is that the way a lot of these contracts are written is that if the player wants to leave, there's no penalty for the player to leave. They just say you just go. They don't try to claw back the money. They just say just go, which
Right.
which means that the that's a double-edged sword. It means that you have more flexibility as a player potentially to go to the transfer portal, but you also have less certainty as a player in a situation like that.
But it's the same double-edged sword it's always been though, because you better believe that if they've given me $300,000 a year and I don't turn in what they deem a $300,000 a year job, that at our end of the season interview they go, "Hey Taylor, we appreciate everything you've done here. We appreciate the effort. We think you might be better suited to play at Akron."
Right.
And you know what I mean? And we think you really thrive there. And if you don't agree with that, well, then meet Coach Pink by the stands at 4 o'clock tomorrow morning, and we'll see how long it takes you to
Yeah.
decide that Akron or somewhere else is better for you.
The former home of Coach Jerry Faust, if you remember Akron. Yeah. And
Yes.
who used to be at Cincinnati Moeller and then Notre Dame and then made it to Akron, and then I'm not sure what happened to him after that. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that the decision, you're very powerful when you're being recruited.
Yes.
Once you're in a program and you're compared to other players in the program and there's evidence of how you play on the field, then it changes. Um,
Well, it can change for the better. It can change for the
it can
worse.
change. That's right. And so it's almost like anything you do, which is any job that you do or anything that you do on your own. The number one thing is to bet on yourself, and you know that the player who sort of exemplified that more than anybody is I think is Dak Prescott. He
Yeah.
bet on himself, and look, he could have he bet on himself. He made a fortune doing it. And by the way, Dak Prescott is I think playing as well as any quarterback in the NFL right now.
Oh, no doubt. Um, the interesting thing is Adam was breaking down the story is so you get 20.5 million and they take away about 2.5 for new scholarships. But it turns out he says that the program gets about 13.5 million. And Coach Josh Heupel can disseminate that however he chooses.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of like the final say. But it was interesting that he said 11% of that goes to the quarterback, 11% of that goes to receivers. But I'm sure it's probably interesting how it goes based on whatever your head coach's deal is. Like you got Brent Venables at
Oh, who's more of a
Oklahoma,
defensive coach, you mean?
right?
Yeah.
He going
Yeah.
like, hey, I got 15% on these edges, on these
Yeah.
pass rushers,
Yeah.
and we'll spend this on the quarterback because and you got to spend on the quarterback. As Michigan, they spent $2.5 million a year on Bryce
Mm,
Underwood,
mm,
and that's because you just can't win without a quarterback. And we saw that at Ohio State, meaning Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord was I think Kyle McCord was a good quarterback. Kyle McCord, for whatever reason, could not handle all that came with being a quarterback at Ohio State,
mm-hmm.
which is why when he went to Syracuse, he played significantly better. And I ain't mad at him, but ain't no expectations at Syracuse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's just not.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go there and you can be a really good quarterback and put up some numbers. But you can't compete for a national championship if you don't have a guy at quarterback. And
What's interesting? That's one of the things that actually makes Lane Kiffin valuable in the marketplace right now is that Lane Kiffin's a very good offensive coach, and he's very good at identifying and nurturing quarterbacks. And
yeah,
that's also the same thing with Ryan Day at Ohio State. He's a former quarterbacks coach.
oh,
He's very good at that. And if you look as college football,
oh
I'm
yeah,
sorry, no, as college football morphs and becomes more and more like the NFL.
right.
I think offensive minded coaches in college football are going to become much more sought after and sort of much more important. And those are going to be the ones that are, if you pair them with the right program, those are going to be the ones that are going to compete for national
Okay,
titles.
now here's a question for you.
Okay.
So you're Bryce Underwood. You're headed to LSU and Brian Kelly, who I guess has some reputation for working with quarterbacks and being offensive minded. Um, but it's a bigger question. You're Bryce Underwood. You can go anywhere in America for the most part. If somebody offers you $1.5 million, which LSU did, or 2.5 at Michigan, which does not develop quarterbacks, are you better off taking 1.5 at a place like LSU, which has a reputation for developing quarterbacks, or a coach who does, or 2.5 at Michigan? Now you know me, I'm going to say, and you're Bryce Underwood. Your goal is to get to the NFL because you're the number one quarterback in the country.
Mm-hmm.
I would go somewhere. I would take less money to go somewhere that's specialized, where they got a history of developing quarterbacks and getting them to the league. Because my goal is to get Dak Prescott $60 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to get
Mm-hmm.
Michigan's two and a
Yeah.
half.
Yeah. And so I think you got to look at it two ways. I think that's a totally fair way to look at it. So if I were Bryce Underwood right now, I would look for a top program with an offensive minded coach, which, ironically is probably Lane Kiffin and probably where he committed to, originally. Uh, and if you look at it from a pure money point of view, you have to kind of look at how the money how he's going to earn his money. He's going to earn X amount directly from the university. He's going to earn Y amount in NIL plus other potential sponsorship opportunities. So what I would say is a player, especially like Bryce Underwood, who I think has tremendous upside and might end up being, one of the better quarterbacks to come out of, over the next few years. If he's in a program where his talents are showcased and he becomes this hot player, his endorsement value is going to go through the roof. So I think he's got to really have somebody look at, okay, you can stay at a program where you're currently in, and you'll be on national TV, and you'll still do well. But this program and that school is all about running, it's about defense, it doesn't emphasize quarterbacks. Or you can go to a school that emphasizes quarterbacks, that emphasizes development of them. That's also a high profile school. I think his value actually increases in the endorsement market more than he would than he if he had to take a little bit less in just pure money from the university.
Yeah, that's a good point. I buy it, but I just think it's interesting. Like if I was a top flight quarterback, and I'm not saying this as an Ohio State Michigan
Yeah.
thing. There's no way I'd go to Michigan because of what you just said. What did we just got through talking about? Teams and their personalities.
Yeah.
They are a run the ball, too tight,
Yeah.
physical,
Well,
defensive minded ball
right.
control team.
Right.
Ain't nothing about that says quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's very true. And it's, I think, I watch, we'll talk about the Ohio State game in a little bit. I watched Bryce Underwood, and I actually felt bad for the guy because he had no chance. He had no chance in that game. And it's not because he's not a great player, because I think he's actually an exceptional player. He had no chance because the team doesn't emphasize a quarterback, and he's going up against one of the best defenses in the country. He had no chance to succeed. You can't grade him on that game. He just had no chance to succeed. But what I also think is fascinating is that C.J. Carr, who is the grandson of Lloyd Carr, former Michigan coach,
Right?
he's at Notre Dame. He didn't go to Michigan. He went to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
What does that tell you?
Yeah.
It
That's
might tell you that Bryce Underwood's at Michigan, but it also tells you that he also didn't go to Michigan.
and now Michigan's got to, and I don't know what kind of contract he signed, but now you've also got to keep him because there'll be other schools saying, "Hey, we can teach you how to play quarterback
Mm-hmm.
down here.
Mm-hmm.
We can show you how to throw for 300 yards."
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was a quick aside. A friend of mine who knows football was talking about this. He was talking that, and he said, "You guys don't develop quarterbacks either." I said, "Now wait a minute. That's a completely different conversation. If you want to say Ohio State's quarterbacks don't perform in the NFL, you can say that if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
But if your goal was to be a number one draft choice and get to the NFL from Ohio State, I mean, dog, C.J. Stroud and Dwayne
Dwayne
Haskins,
Haskins, yeah, sure, yeah.
Justin Fields. You get a little bit of credit for Joe Burrow, about a half or a third, depending on
Mm-hmm.
how much you think it was.
Mm-hmm.
I said, even Kyle McCord was a 6th-round pick. I mean, so
Will Howard was a 6th round pick, also, wasn't
yeah.
he? Yeah.
So
So
we get them to the league,
yeah,
which is more than you can say for some other places.
yeah. No,
And
you know
then
what?
what?
Here, my take on that is that I think if you look at the really great quarterbacks in the NFL, whether it's Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or Dak Prescott or whoever it is, the great quarterbacks in the NFL had to go through some like major adversity in college, or go
Yeah.
through. They had so much was on them compared to somebody who plays at Ohio State or plays at Alabama, and
Oh,
I think that's a function of why if you have that level of talent, if so much falls on you, and you fight through the adversity, then you actually I think you have a better chance of getting into the NFL and performing at a high level. That also then kind of goes and flies in the face of my argument about Bryce Underwood. Maybe he should stay at Michigan. Maybe that's where he should stay, because he's probably going to face adversity as a quarterback there. But I
uh,
think it's a little bit of a different animal, because I think that Michigan should be able to compete at that level, but they don't. I mean, again, it's not because I'm an Ohio State guy. They don't have the dudes. I was watching that game. They just don't have the players. I was watching Penn State. Penn State has the players this year. That Penn State was to me, a much their depth and their roster was much better than a Michigan.
yeah.
Yeah. So.
No, it's a thing. And back to Tennessee and how they broke up their
Mhm, mhm.
their roster. The whole thing is how you allot it, and what's going to come up more and more is how you get rid of players that you miss on.
Right.
I'm making light of, hey, meet Mr. Coach Pink by the stands, but they're not going to they're not going to pay you $500,000 a year and then you don't perform to a level that they thought you should perform.
Mhm.
And so I think college football will just become more and more and more transactional because every year Jeremiah Smith, he doesn't even have to say I need a raise. He's just going to say I mean, he's not going to say anything. They're going to come to him and say,
Of course.
"Hey, you made $4 million last year. You good with 6 this year?"
Hmm.
And he'll say, "Yeah, cool,"
Hmm.
because everybody else is blowing his phone up saying, "Hey, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that?" And so I get it when coaches say you got to re-recruit your team every year. And my answer is, that's why they pay you 8 digits.
What do you think that means for the transfer portal then? Because if you have a lot of players who, because most when I consider the transfer portal, I think it's a player himself deciding, you know what, I want out of this school. But if you enter the transfer portal as a player who's being pushed out of the school, how do you think that impacts the transfer portal in general? Or
Oh, I mean, I think it's you just looking for a soft landing spot. But if you're pushed out, the first thing is you have to like, why am I being pushed out? Like, for real. You have to have a real understanding of why it didn't work there. Sometimes it's performance, sometimes it's attitude. If it's performance, maybe is it performance because you can't play, which means I can't play at Ohio State, but I can play at Kansas,
Mhm.
or I can't play at Kansas, but I can play at a Group of Five school,
Right,
or I can't play at a Group of Five school. Maybe I need to go play at a HBCU or one AA school.
right,
So you got to be honest with where your talent
yeah,
is, and then after that, it becomes, did I go to a place that plays man and I'm really better at zone? Did I go to a power blocking team and I'm really better at zone blocking?
hmm,
All those kinds of
hmm,
things. Did I go
hmm,
to defense that wants you to be big and physical, but I'm really better suited for small and fast?
hmm,
And then you just target those programs and hope you got tape up there,
hmm.
and go from there. But I'm of the belief that the transfer portal is a great learning tool, uh, because again, sometimes you make a great decision to transfer, and sometimes you hop in the portal and you go, "Oh my God, nobody wants me." And what have you learned? You learned a very, very valuable life lesson, which is, don't go putting yourself in situations where you don't already understand what the outcome is.
Hmm.
And so somebody can go out there and get hemmed up in the portal, and you can feel bad about them, but they learned a life lesson that helps them make great decisions the rest of their life, because everybody screws up from time to time, and it's all about how you bounce back and overcome it. And so, no, everybody who jumps in the portal not getting paid, and they're not even gonna find a spot, or they're gonna have to downgrade and humble themselves and be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I'm here." And it's very familiar to me because my son played at one of those Texas high school football powers, DeSoto High School, and I can't tell you, man, how many kids off of the teams he played on would come back and they either played one AA, or they played lower level Division 1 like an
Hmm.
HBCU,
Hmm. Hmm.
and they'd be like, "Man, our facilities in high school were so much better
Hmm.
than what we had in college."
Yeah.
And you just like, it's a different world out there. And so you have to, when you jump out of Ohio State or a Power Four school, you're not guaranteed to end up at the same kind of spot.
Yeah, I think you bring up an excellent point. I think a sort of a corollary to that is a lot of these kids have been recruited so heavily and so hyped up and think that they are going to be the next, they're going to do really well wherever they land, and they're being really
Right?
coveted by lots of programs. And entering the transfer portal is truth serum for them at that point.
Yes.
And that truth serum, to your point, is absolutely critical for somebody who's 19, 20 years old and who might be told for the first time, you're good, but you're not that good.
Right?
And that'll have an effect of one of two ways on most people. Some people will say, you know what, I'm just not good enough. That's enough for me.
Right?
Others will say, okay, I'm going to take this as a challenge. And I'm going to get better, and I'm going to show the big school why they made a mistake on me, and I'm going to show everybody that I can play. And I think if you find the players in that second group, I think those can be just absolutely excellent players. They may not be as good as the top D1 players, but they'll certainly be very productive, strong players for most programs.
Now, I was just looking up because there was a kid who fit that mold. Name was Jonte Cook. Played at DeSoto with my son. Was a Texas signee. Got dismissed from them. Then he went to Washington. Got kicked off that team. Settled in Syracuse. And I was just looking up his stats. He caught 45 for 549 and 2 touchdowns. And he was a 5-star receiver coming out of high school.
Mm-hmm.
But the most impressive thing to me was he got through the season. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like he's a junior, at least in transcript, because my son's a junior. And this is the first full football season he's had. So the victory was in getting through a season. And a guy like Fran Brown might be exactly what he needs to pull the best out of him, because he was the definition of a guy who had so much talent that he was pampered and catered to his entire, high school and 7-on-7 career.
Yeah, and Fran Brown is the type of coach who is perfect for this kind of player.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and now he looks like
perfect.
he's, nice. Now he's, like I said, he finished the season. He had a solid year. Now he can work on having a great year. And, because he's got the skills to play in the NFL. It's just, will you put it all together?
Yeah, absolutely. So bottom line for you on this?
Bottom line is, man, the salary cap, even in college football, evens everything up for everybody. And Tennessee gave you a glimpse of how it really works.
Right. Bottom line for me is even more evidence that college football is rapidly becoming almost identical to the NFL. This is yet another example of how college football is essentially becoming NFL light and essentially a professional sport.
Moving on. OH, baby.
OHIO.
I thought it was I had anxiety. I had PTSD from the previous 3 or 4 years about this game, where I really looked at it and I was just like, again, as I said, if we don't help them, they can't win. So what happens? First play of the game, they go 40 yards. And I go, geez, is this what we're going to do?
Andrew Marshall's a good back, yeah.
But they held him to a field goal.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, settle down. And then Sayin, who's been great all year, throws a pick. And I'm like, didn't I just, and I'm talking to the TV now, didn't I just say, if we don't help them, they can't win? But when they got a field goal out of that, I go, we played like poop, and it's 6-0. And then on the next drive, they moved the ball. I think they converted a 3rd down, and it was like, you can exhale now. And then Sayin hit, I think, Bo Jackson on a check down, and he went 25 yards. And I go, okay, the game is settled down now.
Bo Jackson was critical in that drive. Yeah, look, it's funny. We were talking about this earlier before we started this the podcast. I actually was watching the beginning of the game and was kind of just looking at the Michigan players and was looking at the Ohio State players, and the Michigan players were just way overhyped. And it was one of those where I just thought Ohio State just needs to endure the first half of the first quarter, and they're going to be fine, because Michigan just does not have the talent to compete with Ohio State. They just don't. And that's essentially what you saw. It was just such a gulf in talent. I also think that in order to win at college football, and I think in order to win at college football in a national championship, you have to have a strong offensive-minded coach, and Ohio State has that in Ryan Day, and I just don't see that offensive-minded coach, a strong offensive coach at Michigan. They just don't have it either.
No, I was impressed by the offensive line. It's been a while since I was really impressed by the offensive line. And, my only questions I had about Ohio State entering a game like this was, how would they match up physically? Because they haven't been the most physical team over the last few years.
That's true.
And so my whole thing was like, okay, Michigan, Indiana, Notre Dame, we run the ball, we're physical. Can you match that physicality? And they did against Michigan. And so I felt good about that. And now, obviously, going into the Big Ten Championship this week, you'll have to do it against Indiana. And now you think it's going to be a blowout. I'm too. I've got too much PTSD for that.
Do I think Ohio State's going to blow out Indiana? Oh no, I don't
Yeah.
think that. I don't think that. I think it'll be close. I think just going back to Michigan, I think if you talk about the physicality that Ohio State had in that game, I thought one of the more underappreciated moves or one of the most underappreciated plays or decisions, I guess, in that game. It was the third quarter, and Ohio State was either up 17-9 or 24-9. I don't recall.
Right.
It was second and 5, and Michigan had an incomplete pass or was stopped, for
Oh
no
yeah.
gain, and there was a holding penalty.
Right.
And Ohio State said, "Man, we're good. We'll take them 3rd and 5." That to me is the ultimate sign of disrespect. They didn't think for once that Michigan could convert 3rd and 5 against them.
No.
That to
No.
me was that sort of encapsulated the game because at that point it was clear that Ohio State was a better team. It was clear that they were going to win that game, and there was just no consideration that they were going to get first down on 3rd and 5 unless my guy Ingbenosson had a pass
Yeah.
interference. But
I think it's going to be a great challenge against Indiana. Indiana's going to treat it like the Super Bowl.
yeah,
I think. I think. Even though it's at Indianapolis, it'll be a 50-50 crowd. Be a great atmosphere.
I agree.
Uh, I think it'll be a close game, and I think Ohio State will pull away a little bit in the second half. But it's just a little bit. Like I expect it to basically be a 7-point game. Going deep
Yeah,
into the fourth quarter.
yeah. I tend to agree with that. I think that Indiana has a very good offensive line. I think Indiana has a couple of good skill position players, good receivers, and I think their quarterback is very good. I think he's a little bit overhyped for what he is now, but I still think he's one of the better quarterbacks in the country. Um,
Right.
but you've said this on numerous occasions, and it's incredibly true here, which is that for Indiana, this is going to be going up against Ohio State for the Big Ten championship, maybe the single biggest game in the history of Indiana football. And what it is for Ohio State, they're playing for the Big Ten championship, which they haven't done for a few years, but which they do very often.
Right.
And if they win, it's great. And I'm sure they want to win, and I'm sure they're going to try to win. But if they lose, they still know they have a pretty good chance at winning the national title anyway. So
Yeah.
you're going to have just totally different types of motivation for this game.
Right.
Yeah,
No, I think that's interesting because, real quick, the question will be: no matter what Indiana does, will they be able to ratchet it up again for their playoff game, or will
right.
they expend so much emotion in this game that they can't get it back up?
Yeah, and I think that's a key question. That's why if you've watched Ohio State this year, Ohio State is running a marathon. And
Yes.
they're pacing themselves and they're looking to make sure that they finish mile 24, 25, and 26 as strong as they, started miles two, started 1, 2, and 3. Um, Indiana is running a sprint every weekend, from what I can see, and you can only run that sprint for so long. Um, so I think that's going to be the question is who, I've said this kind of repeatedly, is who can sustain this over 4 games when you're playing against really top, strong physical teams. The other thing that Ohio State has is that they have they had to be hyped up for Michigan because it's Michigan and they'd lost a few years in a row. Um, the question is, can Ohio State get hyped up for the second week in a row? That's also going to be an issue.
And they can. Bottom line for me, Buckeyes win the Big Ten championship in a great game, 23-20.
23-20. Okay. Bottom line for me is it will be a close game for the first half, maybe even into the third quarter. I think Ohio State pulls away, and I think they pull away by 7 to 10 points at the end.
Right. Well, there you have it. A couple of Buckeyes predicting Buckeye
Go
victories tonight.
figure. That never
I was
happened.
going to say,
Yeah.
imagine that.
Yeah.
He's Jeremy Pink. I'm Jean-Jacques Taylor. We'll holler at you next week. Until then, keep an eye on your money.
I'm Jeremy Pink, and we'll see you next week.